which means that Kamala Harris will stay. But you do have a Madison Square Garden rally that took place earlier, which has been making headlines over here with both the Democrats and whoever chooses to be Republican. Many of them have been undecided about who to vote for.
Quickly talk about the 2016 pattern, because so much is being spoken of in terms of what one can expect and how surprising really can the verdict be. What do you make of what some of the experts have been able to suggest so far in the conversations that you've had? Because in 2016, Donald Trump managed to bag the blue line, all of those three states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin and Michigan. Kamala Harris, of course, has her hopes pinned on the same. But North Carolina as well. There are indications that North Carolina may just go to the Democrats. So nothing can be ruled out, and that's why it's being called a neck and neck.
Oh, absolutely. Like, no one expected Biden to win Georgia 4 years ago. Georgia has never gone to a Democrat since 1992, when Bill Clinton won Georgia. So it was a huge shock. It was a huge surprise that Biden flipped Georgia 4 years ago. I think the interesting thing is, I think you've sort of got to a point where North Carolina and Georgia both will be called before Pennsylvania. And one thing to watch out for is if either of those two states, either North Carolina or Georgia, go the Democrat way, go to Harris, then it's going to be a blowout night for her, because right now the Harris campaign has focused all of its energies, much of its energies, on these three blue wall states of Pennsylvania, Michigan and Wisconsin, in the hope that those three states will tip them over the 270 mark. But if the turnout is so massive and people are motivated enough to vote for whatever reason it is, it could be abortion that's on the line.
57.5% of the vote, Donald Trump 41.5% of the vote. Kamala Harris with a 258,000 plus vote lead. That's with about a quarter, 23% of the estimated vote in Pennsylvania counted as of now. In battleground Michigan, Kamala Harris with 53.7% of the vote. Donald Trump with 44.3% of the vote. Harris with a 64,000 plus vote lead. That's with an estimated 12% of the vote counted in Michigan. Still very early in Michigan. In battleground North Carolina, Donald Trump in the lead. 50.7% of the vote. Harris with 48.1% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 75,000 plus vote lead. That's with more than half, 51% of the estimated vote counted in battleground North Carolina. In battleground Georgia, Donald Trump still holding on to his lead, 52.9% of the vote. Harris has 46.4% of the vote. Donald Trump right now with a 249,000 plus vote lead. Now it's a 255,000 vote lead. That's with an estimated 71% of the vote counted in battleground Georgia. In Virginia, Donald Trump in the lead as of now, 49.3% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 48.7% of the vote. Donald Trump is ahead by more than 15,000 votes. That's with more than half, 56% of the estimated vote, but still a lot of vote to come in the Commonwealth of Virginia. In New Hampshire, Harris with 53.4% of the vote. Donald Trump with 45.9% of the vote. Harris with an 18,000 plus vote lead. That's with under a third of the vote counted in New Hampshire. 30% of the estimated vote counted in New Hampshire. In Ohio, Donald Trump in the lead, 54.3% of the vote. Harris with 44.8% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 332,000 plus vote lead. That's with almost 60%, 58% of the estimated vote counted in the Buckeye state. Now let's go to John King at the Magic Wall. John.
And so, Jake, you lay out the results, and there are some surprises there, right? At least where we are right now. So we just want to go back and follow up where we were with David Chelling was talking about some of the outstanding vote. We know in Virginia is early vote, and that percentage is going to jump, and we know that the vice president is doing quite well in that vote. So I just want to show you what he means by how this can change. Again, Donald Trump's lead has been shrinking. It was 16,000 not that long ago. It's 12,395 now. Look at the Northern Virginia suburbs here. I just want to show you these circles help us understand where are there live outstanding votes, meaning votes that we know are out there that have not been counted yet. Right? You see the big circles, the biggest circles around the Northern Virginia suburbs, also Richmond and the suburbs around that, and some big Republican circles down here, Virginia Beach area, and some here in the suburbs more to the south, the exurbs south of Richmond. But I want to focus up here, and just to show you why you can say early on, you say, whoa, what's happening here? But then things can change pretty quickly when large population centers report their votes. So let's take Fairfax County. It's the largest of the suburban counties. It's the #1 county population-wise in Virginia. The vice president's getting 66% of the vote, 63% of the vote in. Look at the number where she is, though, 250,000. We know turnout is robust, right? So we should be somewhere around 2020 when we end 2024, maybe a little higher, maybe a little lower, but somewhere around it. 250,000 votes right now. If you go back in time, you see 419,000 votes. So if she's winning 60+%, the president was winning 70% 4 years ago. You have Vice President Harris winning 66, a little below. Virginia looks like it's going to be a little bit more competitive this year. But you can see just right there in that one county, there's a lot of votes still out, and she's winning disproportionately in the math right now. That can change, but it generally tracks when you get above 60% of the vote. And so just in that one county right there, the math, when those votes come in, the math can change. So it doesn't mean it will. But there's more than enough Democratic votes still outstanding, or votes outstanding in Democratic areas is the better way to put it, for that to happen. So let's check in on the other battlegrounds as we go through. This one, again, go back in time. This was the closest Donald Trump victory in a battleground state. Of the battlegrounds he won, 74,000 votes, 483, 74,483. 4 years ago. He's 110 ahead right now, but we're only at 54% of the vote, right? So you see these gray areas. What are those? That's where you have no votes in yet. So we're still waiting. Some of these smaller counties. This one.
All right, we also have with us right now on the broadcast Harsh Shringla, the ambassador who's joining us. Mr. Shringla, thank you so much for speaking to CNN News 18. We've just gotten these early results, early trends coming in right now. Trump surging past 150 electoral votes. In fact, he's holding on to his lead in important states like North Carolina and Georgia as well. But if we talk about the U.S. presidential election, you know, it's been full of twists and turns with 2 assassination attempts on Donald Trump. From India's perspective, I wanted to understand from you, how important is this election? And also, you know, if at all, the former president, Donald Trump, is elected to power, what does this mean for India, given his very strategic outreach recently to the Indian diaspora, how he condemned the recent attacks on Indian minorities in Bangladesh?
So just a brief word before I respond to your question to put things in perspective. You know, I think it's very early, and
Yes,
you know, the trends
indeed.
that you're seeing does not indicate in any way the final result, because these are expected trends. And what is important are the battleground states, and I think what's important is
Yes.
Pennsylvania and Michigan, where Kamala Harris seems to be leading.
She's leading
But having
in
said that,
Pennsylvania, yes.
and Michigan, I think. So I think having said that, let's come down to the question at hand. I think obviously the U.S. elections is very important for a close strategic partner like India. We are so interlinked in many ways to the U.S. economy in terms of investments, technology, trade, the people-to-people ties, but also at the political level, a strategic connect between our two countries as quad partners brings us, I think, much closer in many senses. The defense aspect of it also cannot be underemphasized.
Oh, absolutely. You know why, Mr. Shringla, I talked about Trump is because of his camaraderie that he shares with the Prime Minister. And you know, how both of them are very aligned as far as Trump making America great again and Modi's emphasis on India first. You know, both of them having very similar interests as far as domestic economy is concerned, or secure borders as well.
Yeah, well, I've seen firsthand the personal connect you know, that Donald Trump had with Prime Minister Modi. I think they really hit it off very well. Howdy Modi was a prime example of how the two came together to address an audience of 50,000 Indian Americans. And then Trump came to India, and we had Namaste Trump, which was a huge success with the
Yes.
1 lakh people in that stadium in Ahmedabad. But having said that, the Prime Minister also has a very, very good relationship with Kamala Harris. He has met her as Vice President in 2021 and last year when I think he visited Washington, D.C., you know, had a state visit there. And from that point of view, you know, it's very important that whoever is President of the United States has a good rapport with the Prime Minister of India for that relationship to move forward. So Prime Minister Modi has had a great relationship with President Obama, President Trump, President Biden, and with Vice President Kamala Harris. And I think that's the way it should be. But yes, I mean, you know, Trump has been president. He's a known commodity. We've dealt with him. He's got good things to say about Prime Minister Modi and about India. I think he's cognizant about some of the concerns that we have, not only in India, but in our neighborhood. So I think
and he also cut military aid to Pakistan, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Shringla, isn't that right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Absolutely. That happened when I was ambassador, and successive U.S. presidents have been threatening to cut military aid to Pakistan, and Trump really went and did it. And he also brought down other assistance to Pakistan to a bare minimum. So I think he means business. And even in terms of tariffs, we are worried about tariffs. He did increase some of the tariffs with India, but then he went and levied a 25% tariff increase on $350 billion of Chinese imports into America. And I think that really gave us a window of opportunity, which took our trade to a much higher level. And our exports really boomed as a result of that. So there is a collateral benefit that we have seen. And even in his campaign, in the last 1 month, he's used the word China 40 times. And of course, I think his focus has been on the strategic aspects of the US's outlook. In many senses, we share from a Quad perspective and as a strategic partner of the United States.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, both the leaders have emphasized on domestic growth, on economic nationalism, and most importantly, secure borders. Kindly stay on with me, Ambassador. I also have with us on the broadcast Dr. Joseph M. Chalil, who's a noted author, Seher Khan, a foreign policy expert as well. Thank you so much, and a very good morning to all of my guests. Dr. Joseph, what do you make of this very tightly fought elections between the former president and the Vice President Kamala Harris? I mean, both of them neck and neck. These are some real anxious moments for the people of the United States. You know, it's an election which is immensely significant in U.S. history as well.
Good morning and greetings from Palm Beach, Florida, hometown of Donald Trump. I was just at the convention center. We were usually the watch parties for election nights are in smaller halls with, let's say, 1,000 or 2,000 people. Trump actually moved his convention watch party to the Palm Beach Convention Center, which can host tens of thousands of people. And it's sold out for the past few days. And we couldn't even get a journalist in there. So the excitement is very big here. And this is maybe in my lifetime, I've been working here for over 24 years with multiple Republican presidents and Democratic presidents. This is the first time it's a changed election. The electorate has changed. The coalition has changed. So if Trump is able to pull this off, I think it's going to be a miracle. But I'm expecting that not just the presidency, but they are feeling very good about the Senate and the Congress, because the president by himself is handicapped without having the Senate control, because the Senate is needed to confirm all the appointees, including all the ministers, secretaries, as we call it here, and all the department heads need to be approved and confirmed by the Senate. So let's say even the president wins without Senate majority, he's a handicapped president. So, but again, even though what we see, the early leads, nothing is surprising as we speak from the results we see. But remember, the Florida, where I'm from, and Ohio, where now both places Trump won were
both places have gone the Trump way. Dr. Joseph, just kindly stay on with me, and Seher, I'll just come to you in a moment. Zaka Jacob is also joining us right now. In fact, he's getting us all the live updates as well. Zaka, as Dr. Joseph was mentioning, it's a changed election. It's a changed electorate as well. I want you to talk a little bit more about the key demographics groups that's going to be a decider in this presidential election, because Trump did lose ground with the white college voters in especially the swing states. I mean, Biden won 6 out of the 7 states. A lot, in fact, had changed post-COVID as well. So if you could just talk about, the shift that we have seen in American politics as well.
I'll just come to that in 1 second. I think there's a lot of noise here in the crowd that's there at Howard University. A large number, they're shouting Kamala Harris, saying we will win. There's a giant screen where they're playing CNN, so I suspect there is some state or some key race alert or projection that they've made, which is why there is so much screaming going on. I don't know what state has been called. What I do know so far is that Georgia and North Carolina, more than 70% of the vote has been counted.
It's New York. They've called New York. And that's perhaps why we are hearing the jubilant voices behind you and the celebrations as well.
Okay, that's 28 electoral college votes. So the electoral college math is now sort of bumping up a little bit more for Kamala Harris. But look, all of this is actually, frankly, irrelevant, because these are all states that are set. ultimately the president is going to be chosen by those half a dozen or so battleground states. And there, two of those states, Georgia and North Carolina, one went to Biden, the other went to Trump last time around. Georgia was very, very close last time. It was just 12,000 votes that separated the two candidates. This time around, over 70% of the vote has been counted. And last time I checked, Donald Trump had a 200,000 odd lead. So I think it's safe to say, unless something really dramatic happens in the suburbs of Atlanta and Metro Atlanta, where there is still a ton of votes to come, unless there is a dramatic change of fortunes there, I think it looks like Georgia might go back to the Republican corner, as it always was. Remember, the last Democrat who carried Georgia before Biden was Bill Clinton in 1992. Again, in North Carolina, more than 70% of the vote has been counted. And last I checked, Trump was leading over 100,000. So he's again in relatively safer territory, if I may say so. Again, still 30% of the vote to be counted. But in the other blue wall states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, only 20% of the vote has been counted, which means there is still 80% of the vote that needs to be counted. Similarly, in Michigan, only 10% of the vote has been counted so far, so the 90% of the vote is still outstanding. So I think it's going to take a long time to get to those three states to at least get to a point where, they're 50% in or 60% in counted. But I think the critical thing is what this means. If Georgia and North Carolina stay with Trump, then it means Harris has one straight shot at the presidency, and that is she has to win Pennsylvania, she has to win Michigan, she has to win Wisconsin. Is that an ideal place you want to find yourself in as a candidate who is hoping to win the presidency? No, it's not an ideal place because it's your one straight line shot. You have to win those three states. Even if you miss one of those states, you're out of the competition. Whereas for Donald Trump, if he manages to retain Georgia and North Carolina, and we'll see how Arizona and Nevada go. We don't know the projections for those two states.
Right.
But Arizona, he's been leading by over 2 points for the last couple of weeks. So that means then Trump needs to win just one of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, which puts him in a slightly more comfortable position than Kamala Harris.
Well, he's holding on to his lead, at least for now, in North Carolina and Georgia, two very crucial battleground states. Let's just quickly dip into our sister channel, CNN, because there is some very important information coming in as well. Listen in.
In Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, hold that Nebraska congressional district I just showed you, then you're the president of the United States. Right? That's her easiest. No path is easy, but her easiest path is keep the blue wall. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. So let's move up Wisconsin so you can get a better look at home. She's ahead right now at the moment, but we're only 18% of the vote. And again, John's a broken record tonight, but I want you to look up at all of those gray areas. And I just want to remind you, in most of them, not all of them, but in most of them, you're in rural Trump country. So as you come back to the 2024 map and you say the vice president's ahead, that's where you want to be. You want to be ahead, but you've got a long way to go. So what are we looking for? I'm going to do this in reverse order. Because of the questions about young voters turning out, whether unhappiness with the White House over Israel-Gaza, Israel-Hamas policy would impact youth turnout. 38% in Dane County, that's the University of Wisconsin. Absolutely essential for any Democratic win in Wisconsin to run it up here, not just in the percentage, but with the raw math. So let's look. 38% of the vote. So a long way to go. Long way to go. Let's just compare it to the president. President Biden had 76%. Keep an eye on it. Don't panic yet if you're a Democrat, but keep an eye on that because the vice president needs to be as close to that as she can be. And at the moment, she's running a little bit behind that. That's Dane County. That's Madison. This is the biggest population center. Spent a lot of time here in the last year. The big question here is, do black voters turn out? And the subset question of that is, does Donald Trump make inroads, especially among black men? We did see some evidence of that in our several trips out to Milwaukee. At the moment, I was texting with somebody in Milwaukee earlier, by the way, who said they thought turnout was actually going pretty good for the Democrats. We'll see if that turns out. At the moment, 25% of the vote in, 66% if you round up, 32% for Donald Trump. So let's just go back in time knowing we have a long way to go. And Milwaukee sometimes reports late. But if you go back in time, Joe Biden again, 69%, Trump at 29%. So the 69% is what jumps out. Trump is a little above right now. Trump's a little above where he was 4 years ago. She's a little behind where the president was 4 years ago. It's only 25% of the vote. We're not pouring cement on any of this, but that's where you say, oh, we got to keep an eye on that as we go forward. Then you move over here, you go into the WOW counties, Waukesha, the biggest among them. This is a Republican suburb, long has been a Republican suburb. The challenge for Democrats, I've been saying this about Trump, in the battleground states that tend to lead in blue. Where's Trump's number in the suburbs? Can he compete? He's not going to win, but can he compete? That's the challenge for the vice president here. Waukesha County tends to be a Republican suburb. So there she is at 40%, Trump at 59%. Again, you go back in time, 59% to 39% 4 years ago. Welcome to another 20,000 vote race.
All right, so those are some of these early trends, and we reiterate it's just too soon, very, very early, information coming in right now. Seher Khan joins us. She's a foreign policy expert. Seher, thank you so much, first of all, for your patience. Seher, now, that's the news coming in. Donald Trump surging that 100 mark in electoral votes. I want to talk about, how has Donald Trump come back from political abyss? I mean, his popularity plummeted as he tried to overturn the 2020 elections, and then all of a sudden he rebounded, and with the early leads coming in, surging past the 100 electoral votes. So what do you make of the dominance of Donald Trump despite all the scams and scandals against him?
Well, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's such a pleasure to speak to you. And of course, I've been watching the election race quite closely as well. I think the question you ask has been on everybody's mind. And to some extent, I think this kind of represents or indicates the division in American society. And certainly in 2020, former President Trump's reputation and his popularity plummeted because at the end of the day, the peaceful transition of power has been a hallmark of US democracy, regardless of how contentious races have been and how candidates have argued on debates and on the campaign trail. When an election has been lost, the losing candidate has always shook the hand of the winning candidate, and there has been a smooth transition of power. And that did not happen in 2020. And for a lot of Americans, that was a wake-up call of how divided America has become. And I think this election, what we're really seeing is a dissatisfaction with the Biden presidency and the Biden administration on several key issues. Some domestic, but also some international as well. And usually in US elections, foreign policy doesn't play that big of a role. Most elections, while we'll talk about foreign policy, it'll be a point on the campaign trail. When people come out to vote, they're voting for domestic issues. So you have the economy, you have jobs, you have abortion, stuff like that, that becomes a bigger player. I think now, because of the wars that are engulfing our world in Ukraine, in Gaza, and the electorate being younger and and they're basically using social media a lot for their news, I think we're seeing a change also in how people want the US presidency to react. So I do agree that it's a little too early to tell, how, and all the states that have been called are what we expected. So there are no surprises there.
Yes.
So I think it's a little too early to be thinking if this is a Trump presidency or not. But I really think it really shows how divided America is. The demographics of America are changing, and this is what we're seeing playing out now.
Oh, indeed. And I completely second you on that, how the demographics have changed, how there's been a shift in American politics in the last few years, especially post-COVID. Ambassador Shringla, as I've been saying, how significant these elections are in the U.S. history, how do you think it would impact not just the nation's future, but also global geopolitics in the years to come?
It's absolutely critical, I feel, because we are in a very, very volatile state as far as global affairs is concerned. You have regional conflicts that are threatening to become global conflicts. The U.S. is at the heart of all of this in terms of, its both its involvement and its ability to impact on these conflicts.
Yes.
I think whoever becomes president would have a great responsibility. A good part of the world looks to the United States for global leadership on these issues. And I think there is a sense that, the world has had enough of conflicts. You need, someone at the helm who can actually try and resolve these conflicts and get them to reach some conclusion. Because, not only the effect they have on the people who are actually involved in the conflict and who are suffering from the conflict, but also a collateral damage, to the rest of the world in terms of the economic impact, inflation, and the prices of essentials for people all over the world. So I think indebtedness of nations is also something that we have to take into account. All of this really means that the global south, the developing world, is looking to the United States to take a view that can help bring these conflicts to an end. So whoever becomes president, President Trump has a stated goal of bringing these conflicts to an end.
Yes.
President Kamala Harris has also talked about trying to put an end to the Gaza conflict and to the Middle East issue. Ukraine is more complicated, but whatever it is, I think if you see Prime Minister Modi's endeavor to reach out both to Russia and the Ukraine, it is an expression of our sentiment and that of the global south to try and bring some resolution to these conflicts in the interest of humanity and the world.
Oh, absolutely, Ambassador. In fact, the former President Donald Trump has exuded confidence of bringing a resolution to the ongoing conflicts. In fact, he's been claiming that, the unpredictability factor is actually his strength, how he's been boasting about how these conflicts never, ever had started during his tenure as a president. We're going to watch the space very closely. We have to really slip into a short break, but the news and updates continue, and we'll get you the very latest from our sister channel, CNN, on our continuing coverage of the U.S. presidential elections.
There's a lot of, music and festivity, and it's like a celebration. It's a bit like how the Harris campaign ended on a very optimistic note, on a note of hope and change, as opposed to the Trump campaign, which ended in a very dark, dour kind of note. The question is, which of the two bases were motivated enough to turn out in larger numbers today? We do know that in places like Philadelphia, for example, there were huge voter turnout, even in Georgia, in Nevada. Ultimately, it boils down to which of the two bases was more enthused to turn out and vote for their candidate. You are going to see record turnout in this election, perhaps even surpassing what we saw in 2020. And with that, I have to step off from this location, but I'm going to continue to give you live hits from the Howard University here in Washington, D.C., the alma mater of Kamala Harris, the vice president, who's expected here in the next few hours for her either victory or concession speech, depending on which way the night goes.
Oh, absolutely, Dhaka. We'll keep coming back to you. Let me go straight across now to my colleague Akanksha Swaroop. In fact, Akanksha getting us all those reactions from New York. She's joining us from where all the buzz is usually. Times Square, Akanksha, the action never stops there. It's been a knife's edge race in most of the states in United States of America. What a historic presidential campaign it has been. It's been full of twists and turns. So what is the sense that you're getting from the ground? New York historically has been always leaning towards the Democrats, except perhaps for one borough. But it's been a nail-biting election, and you've been in the midst of all of it.
Absolutely, Avantika. And as you rightly pointed out, this is a city that never sleeps. And I am here at Times Square to just give you a quick glimpse of where I am. I'm going to request my VJ Arpit. It is a very colorful lot over here. New Yorkers, what you find over here in Times Square are quite a loud, crazy bunch. But at the same time, they're very fiercely protective and private about their political beliefs. So one has to really, ease them into sharing what is it that is on their minds. And that is something that I had to do. But to tell you, as you rightly highlighted, that New York has been a Democratic stronghold, and it continues to be so. There are 5 boroughs over here, including Manhattan, Queens. The only borough that happens to be Republican is Staten Island. But as far as New York is concerned, last time they opted for a Republican president. That was in the year 1984, and that was Ronald Reagan. Ever since, there's only been a spate of Democratic presidential candidates. So that's the scene in New York City. But the issues that are governing this election, basically to put it in black and white, it's a battle between
So the Georgia math, we still have the biggest population center where we're waiting to see some key results.
All right, John, as we stand by for the next poll closings at the top of the hour, here's an update on the race to 270. Donald Trump has 154 electoral votes. Kamala Harris has 81 electoral votes. Obviously, 270 electoral votes are needed to win. Now, another key race alert. Let's go to the states where we have not called. Kamala Harris in the lead in Pennsylvania, 51.4% of the vote. Donald Trump has 47.7% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 88,000 plus votes of a lead, but it's about 35% of the vote that's been counted in Pennsylvania, about a third still count in Pennsylvania. Michigan, Kamala Harris has 52% of the vote. Donald Trump has 46.1% of the vote. Kamala Harris with a 49,000 plus vote lead. That's with only an estimated 15% of the vote counted in the battleground of Michigan. In Wisconsin, another battleground, Kamala Harris 52.2% of the vote. Donald Trump 46.1% of the vote. Harris with a 52,000 plus vote lead, but only 27% of the vote counted in Wisconsin, still very early in Wisconsin. Battleground North Carolina, Donald Trump still in the lead there with 52.1% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 46.7% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 201,000 plus vote lead as of now. That's with 64% of the estimated vote counted in the battleground of North Carolina. In battleground Georgia, Donald Trump in the lead, 51.9% of the vote. Kamala Harris, 47.1% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 208,000 plus vote lead. That's with 79% of the estimated vote in Georgia counted. Still a lot of votes to count there, but a lot of votes have already counted. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, Donald Trump in the Commonwealth of Virginia, Donald Trump has 49.5% of the vote. Kamala Harris, 48.6% of the vote. That is.
All right, going back now to CNN News 18, Zakir Jacob. Zakir, this is the latest that we're getting in that Trump is leading in Wisconsin, but there are still very, very early leads coming in. Pennsylvania has pretty much taken a very strong, decisive stand with Harris. What does this really mean if North Carolina and Georgia is where Trump is leading? He's holding on to his lead in both these battleground states. What does this mean for Kamala Harris, given the fact that Joe Biden had won 6 out of the 7 swing states?
Oh, yeah, I just want to underline 2 facts. One is that in Georgia and in North Carolina, a lot of votes have been counted. In Georgia, for example, almost 80% of the votes have been counted. But what is outstanding, the 20% is to come from Atlanta and its suburbs, and those are primarily Democratic votes. So there is still some fight in that race, even though Donald Trump is leading by over 200,000 votes. Joe Biden won that state by just 12,000 votes last time around. So I will still sort of hold my breath on Georgia, but yeah, Georgia, 80% of the vote counted in. It looks likelier that Trump will win Georgia than lose. North Carolina, again, more than 65% of the vote has been counted. Again, Trump has a 200,000 lead. This was a state that he won by 74,000 votes last time around, so he's in a healthy position. Again, the places in North Carolina where you're going to get results from are the urban pockets. There's still about 30%, 35% of the vote that is still to be counted. Can the Democrats overcome that deficit that they have currently, again, of over 200,000 votes? Whereas in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, all 3 states where Harris is leading, it shows wide margins right now, but the count is very, very low. In Pennsylvania, the count is about 30%, I think 32 or 33%. In Michigan, it is 20%. Even in Wisconsin, it is less than 20%. So I think we need to really hold our breath on these 3 states because the count is so low right now. I think it'll take probably a couple of hours for all 3 of these states to reach over 50%, maybe 60, 70%, and then you're in a position to say, okay, it looks like it's going one way or the other. But I think the critical thing here, Avantika, is if Trump manages to keep both Georgia and North Carolina, then it means that Kamala Harris's path to 270 is straight and narrow. She has to win all 3 blue wall states. She has to win Pennsylvania, she has to win Michigan, and she has to win Wisconsin. If she loses even one of those 3, that's it. That's the end of her campaign. She loses the bid for the White House. Whereas Trump can still manage to win if he wins Arizona, for example, which he's been leading by over 2 points for the last 2 or 3 weeks now. If he wins Arizona, then it has multiple paths for him. He then just needs to win
Right.
Michigan and Wisconsin. He doesn't need to win Pennsylvania, which is the biggest state of the battleground states. So I think what will become clear, let's say in the next hour, once you get solidified sort of more than 90% counting in both Georgia and in North Carolina, is it will tell you that Harris's path is a one straight line. It's a hit or miss. If she hits, winning all 3 states, she's the next president. If she misses even one state, even the smallest state, which is Wisconsin, just 10 electoral college votes, that's the end of her night. That's the end of her campaign.
Fascinating. And you know, Zaka, what a riveting election this has been. I wanted to understand from you the importance of the demographic groups and also about the Indian American community. Which way will they be voting? Because, you know, Kamala Harris has identified a lot more during the election campaign with her black heritage than her Indian roots. Do the Indian American community feel a bit disillusioned or disappointed with that? What is the sense that you're getting in? And also a little bit more on the African American vote and the Hispanic vote.
Yeah, I think the Indian American community, we did speak to individuals of the Indian American community. They did, some of them did express not frustration, but really a concern that you know, she's not been actively playing up her Indian American roots. Her mother is of Indian origin, but you know, I think there's a straight up political reason for it. The Indian American vote is probably just 1% of the entire electorate. The African American vote is almost 15%, and in some places like in Georgia, for example, it can go up to 30%. So if you're a politician and you're trying to get maximum number of votes, you want to play up that part of your heritage which has more voters, which has more a political value for you. And I don't think, having said that, I don't think she's sort of actively overplayed one part of her heritage and underplayed the other. It just so happened. And I think also politically, Trump sort of tried to put her on the mat when he made that comment a couple of months ago saying, you know, when did she become black? I always thought that she was of Indian origin. I think to try and compensate or to counter that, I think Kamala Harris has actively sort of gone to African American meetings. She's going to be here at Howard University, her alma mater, which is predominantly a black university. In fact, she's mentioned this time and time again how she came to Howard to sort of revive her African American heritage, to revive her connection to the African American community. Remember, her mother and her father had been estranged for a long time. She doesn't talk much about her father, even though her African American heritage is from her father. But the fact that she came to Howard College and she's revived that part of her heritage, and obviously that's come in handy as a politician because, you know, in many states, in North Carolina and Georgia, in many states, there is a significant African American vote. And a lot of them are turning up today for Kamala Harris in the hope that that they can put the first African American woman in the White House. So we'll see if that happens. But I think on the Electoral College map, I think the path is becoming very clear. It's becoming very narrow, and it's a straight line hit or miss for Kamala Harris. She has to win all 3 of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin if Trump, as he is looking likely now, to win Georgia and North Carolina.
What a high-stakes battle it has been for both the leaders. Zaka, I wanted to understand from you that what has worked for Donald Trump, what an extraordinary reversal of fortunes it has been for this man who has seen a series of indictments, scams, scandals, his popularity plummeting post the 2020 election when he tried to overturn it. He said that that entire election was stolen from him, and how, you know, he has rebounded since. So what really has worked for Mr. Trump?
Well, you must confess that, look, the state of the economy is not very good. A lot of people, particularly after COVID, young people are finding it hard to get decent paying jobs. The cost of housing has gone up in a big way. Young people don't think that they can afford housing in most sort of major cities across the US. So these are concerns that they're worried about. Also, young people, and we've been talking about this all summer, are extremely aggrieved about the wars that are going on, the Russia-Ukraine war, the Israel-Hamas war, which I think, you know, frankly, it is at the doorstep of the Biden-Harris administration. And as much as Kamala Harris has tried to distance herself from the Biden legacy, as it were. I don't think she's been able to do that very successfully. In fact, on the contrary, it is Trump who's managed to sort of pile her on to Biden and say that, look, she is as much responsible for the disaster that's going on in Gaza, the humanitarian catastrophe there. She's as much responsible as Biden for what's going on in Ukraine. And he has made this very simple pitch that, look, if you want to end these two wars, then I am the man that you need to elect. That you elect Kamala Harris. It's just going to be 4 more years of what you got with Biden. There's going to be no clear plan to end these wars. And I think some young voters, particularly young men, seem to have bought in to that pitch by Donald Trump.
Interesting. In fact, many Americans also remember Trump's economy in far better terms than they view the current economy, and that's a very big one in Trump's favor. Zaka, stay on with me. We have to cut straight across now to our sister channel CNN for those projections that are coming in. Let's take a look.
And CNN can project that Donald Trump will win the state of Montana. As expected, Trump gets Montana with its 4 electoral votes. CNN can also project that Donald Trump will win the state of Utah. As expected, Utah with its 6 electoral votes. Nevada is too early to call, a battleground state that Donald Trump has narrowly lost in the last 2 elections, but is making a big play for this election. Let's look at the electoral math right now. Donald Trump has 172 electoral votes. Kamala Harris with 81 electoral votes, 270 electoral votes needed to win. Neither of them is there yet. Let's look at the key races now. Pennsylvania, Kamala Harris, 49.9% of the vote. Donald Trump has narrowed her 20,000 plus vote lead. He's at 49.2% of the vote. More votes have come in from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. 43% of the estimated vote from Pennsylvania is in, and Kamala Harris right now has an 18,000 plus vote lead there. Kamala Harris in the lead in Michigan, 51.6% of the vote. Donald Trump has 46.5% of the vote. Kamala Harris with a 46,000 plus vote lead. Still, only 16% of the estimated vote in Michigan has been counted. In battleground Wisconsin, Harris is at 49.8% of the vote. Donald Trump is at 48.4% of the vote. She has a 15,000 plus vote lead. That's with more than a third, 35% of the vote counted in Wisconsin. In battleground North Carolina, Donald Trump maintaining his lead. He has 52% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 46.8% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 196,000 plus vote lead. That is with 2/3, 66% of the estimated vote in North Carolina counted. In battleground Georgia, Donald Trump maintaining his lead, 51.9% of the vote. Kamala Harris, 47.1% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 208,000 plus vote lead. That's with 79% of the estimated vote in from the battleground state of Georgia. We're now getting an update on the vote in North Carolina. Let's go to John King, actually, right now. John King, what can you tell us?
Well, Jake, you see the map, and again, as we get later in the night, this is where you start to see things change, especially if a candidate pulls out ahead in a state that not normally is in their lane, if you will. And by that, I'm going to refer to Iowa. Just a moment ago, I was showing you Iowa with the vice president ahead.
Okay, and we have on our broadcast Dr. Joseph M. Chalil, a noted author, Seher Khan, who's also been with us speaking about the issues, the global issues, and the impact and the repercussions that this presidency will have on the entire globe. She's a foreign policy expert. And we also are joining now by Gopalan Balachandran. He is a political scientist, academician, and most importantly, he's Kamala Harris's uncle. Mr. Gopalan, thank you so much. You had the chance to meet the vice president just days before President Biden had stepped aside. What do you think are your niece's chances of winning the U.S. presidential race, which has been a tightly contested, affair between the vice president and the former president?
Look, let me first tell you one thing. The least important thing about me is that I'm Kamala Harris' uncle. I know I've been studying.
Why would you say that?
Yeah, I've been studying years for far more years than she's old.
Sure.
So her being my niece has nothing to do with my understanding of the US. Only thing is this, I have quite a lot of agreement with her because I had a lot of agreement with her mother.
Yes.
And that's the first thing. The second thing is I've been hearing for the last 4 years when she was running for vice presidency, people used to ask me, oh, why is she Afro-American and not Indian? I used to tell them, you are all idiots. Her mother went to California when she was 19 years old, when there were few Indians, and the Indians never used to mix with the blacks, even when I was there. Two, she was involved in civil rights movement even before many blacks were involved. And that certainly did not endear her to the Indians living in the Bay Area.
Right.
She had very few Indian friends. Three, Kamala they lived in Oakland, which is a black community. Her godmother was Afro-American woman. The school she went were all Afro-Americans. Her friends were Afro-American. So I used to tell the guys who used to ask me in Delhi, why is she Afro-American? I said, you're all idiots. I used to tell them plain, you're not journalists, I'm a journalist. These are not the questions you ask. When her whole life was in a black community with a black godmother, etc., and the Indians didn't really mingle with her very much because of her association with the Afro-Americans, you expect she's going to say, oh, I'm an Indian. And two, her mother was a Hindu woman, Brahmin, everybody say. She married a Jamaican, a black African. Indians even today do not like blacks. And you have got laws in various states which prohibit or put obstacles in the way of interreligious marriage. So I used to tell them, you think Kamala is going to tell you, oh, you people are so good. But my mother married a Christian and you are all happy. Not here, you are throwing stones at her. So I said, don't talk rubbish like that. And today I see a couple of other morning also, and saying that she's doing black Americans because of minority.
Right. Mr. Gopalan Balachandran, I wanted to ask you.
She was a black long before she was Hindu.
I get your point.
Let's not bring that question, okay? Now, your question about our elections.
Yes.
Now the question is this. Till for the last few months, if you have been following the elections, you would know the consensus among the political scientists in US and the various correspondents and everybody was that Kamala Harris had 226 electoral votes, consensus, and Trump had 219. All the states that you see in the red in the maps today were already given to Trump prior to the election. The only reason is those elections are sometimes they count quicker. And three, you should know that in US, how the votes are counted are not like in India. Each county counts its vote.
Yes.
And there are thousands of counties.
Indeed,
okay?
yes, Mr. Balachandran, it's a very complex election and also a US election voting system. I'll just come to you, sir. I'll just come to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us, but I will keep coming back to you. You have been very patiently telling us about your niece and how you feel that she is definitely going to be the president of the United States. Akanksha Swaroop, my colleague, is also joining us from New York. She's been getting us not just the sights, but the sounds also of the New Yorkers. Akanksha, over to you. You know, we are just getting in those early trends, early leads on predictable lines. Donald Trump surging past those 100 points in electoral votes. I think the number is 177. He's holding his lead in North Carolina and Georgia, the important battleground states. But tell us, you know, what information do you have, and also what really are the sentiments? New York, in fact, has been called in the Democrats' favor, also on expected lines as well.
Yes, absolutely. But you know what is not on expected lines, Avantika, so far is that this is not one election that is shaping up to be as neck and neck that the polls were showing it to be, because the lead right now that we are referring to of Donald Trump is a sizable one, and he just needs another precisely 100 electoral votes to, in fact, to have Kamala Harris concede defeat. And we'll have to see how this, in fact, that shapes up in the hours ahead. Many have been calling it a red mirage, which is the term they use when the Republicans have an apparent lead, which is not really a decided one. But so far, many election pundits are saying that this is a red mirage. But I think the electoral votes with which Donald Trump is currently holding that lead in itself speaks for what one can expect from the overall result. As you said, what is on expected lines is, of course, the crucial battleground states like Georgia and North Carolina going in favor of Donald Trump, something that the polls had predicted. Surprisingly, Georgia last time had been won by Joe Biden with a very thin margin of almost 12,000 votes. So this time around, Donald Trump has managed to flip Georgia in his favor. We'll have to see which way, in fact, Pennsylvania goes. Wisconsin, Michigan, along with New York, of course, are expected to. New York, of course, has gone Democratic, but we'll have to see how Wisconsin and Michigan are also shaping up. But having said that, yes, it would be very interesting to see with the kind of victory margin, whoever emerges out to be the winner commands. Is this going to be a sweeping victory? And that's going to, in fact, define the kind of coalition government you will see in the White House.
Oh, absolutely. Akanksha, I'm going to keep coming back to you. So the early trends coming in with Donald Trump surging past the 100 points in electoral votes. Seher Khan is with us, foreign policy expert. Seher, I wanted to understand from you about the significance of this U.S. elections. It's been a neck-and-neck battle between the former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris. I know it perhaps is too premature to ask you what do you foresee happening, because one cannot really call the elections till it's over. But the impact of these elections and what kind of impact would it have on global geopolitics in the next 4 years?
Well, that's a great question. And, you know, I definitely don't want to predict. I think we're all in the same room sort of watching the results. But I think the impact on geopolitics and global affairs will be significant if Donald Trump becomes president. I think oftentimes, and I've heard this on the show also, and I've heard other analysts and people speak of Trump, how there were no foreign wars when he was president, and how he has declared that he will end the current wars that are going on in Ukraine and in Gaza. And, you know, it's hard to know if that will be true or not. But I think the thing that at least troubles me, and this is just my personal opinion, is that, you know, when you're conducting foreign policy, it's important to value alliances and international organizations and multilateral organizations and laws and norms for, you know, how they stand. And I feel with President Trump, you know, the first time when he became president, he said certain things that he would do that kind of undermined like U.S. relationships with Europe, which are key allies. It also made many allies in the Indo-Pacific very nervous.
Absolutely. Indeed. Seher, I'll just come to you. I have to go straight back to Zaka, who's joining us now. Zaka, we are getting in those early trends. Battlegrounds are still too early to call. What's the latest that you're getting in at your end?
Okay, so the latest is that in the two big southern states of Georgia and North Carolina, Trump is ahead, no doubt about it. In both of those states, he's up ahead by 200,000 votes. Georgia, he lost by 12,000 votes last time around. And North Carolina, all right, we're just getting a big roar up here at the Howard University grounds. That's because CNN has just projected that Kamala Harris will get the state of Colorado. That's an important one. So 178 to Donald Trump and 91 to Kamala Harris. So we can now divide it between the two belts, as it were. All right, again, the cheer going up because Kamala Harris, with a tiny sliver of a lead in Arizona, a state that she's consistently sort of not led Donald Trump. So in Georgia and North Carolina, in Georgia more than 80% of the vote is in North Carolina, again, close to 70% of the vote is in. Trump is leading by over 200,000 in both of those states. And I think the critical thing is there enough votes out there in urban pockets, both in Georgia and in North Carolina, for Kamala Harris to overcome the 200,000 lead that Donald Trump has. Technically, there are in North Carolina, for example, there's more than 300,000 votes out there in just one county alone. Same is the case in Georgia as well. So technically she can, but that does not mean that she is in a good position to overcome that lead that Donald Trump has right now of 200,000. Like I said, Donald Trump won by a mere 74,000 in North Carolina in 2020. He lost by a mere 12,000 votes in Georgia. It is still a long ways to go. I think a couple of more hours, maybe by midnight, we'll get a better picture of both Georgia and North Carolina. But the other three big states, which is really the ones that she needs to win the presidency, which is Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. You know, in Pennsylvania, just 30% of the vote is counted. She's leading. In Michigan, 20% of the vote is counted. She's leading. In Wisconsin, less than 20% of the vote is counted, and she's leading. So there is a long, long way to go before we get some degree of clarity on those states, possibly into the early morning hours of tomorrow. Okay, the reason the cheer is going up is because of Virginia. Which is where right on, it's the tri-state area. It's Virginia, Maryland, and of course the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., where we are reporting to you from. And I think CNN was just showing for the first time Kamala Harris taking a lead in the state of Virginia.
Oh, that's an important one. Early trends rolling in with Donald Trump leading, but now also some trends coming in with Kamala Harris winning in a few important states as well. Zaka, we'll keep coming back to you. For now, we have to slip into a short break. Stay tuned. Our continuing coverage on the U.S. presidential polls happens on the other side as well. Keep watching. Stay tuned.
Today. We do know that in places like Philadelphia, for example, there were huge voter turnout, even in Georgia, in Nevada. Ultimately, it boils down to which of the two bases was more enthused to turn out and vote for their candidate. You are going to see record turnout in this election, perhaps even surpassing what we saw in 2020. And with that, I have to step off from this location, but I'm going to continue to give you live hits from the Harvard University here in Washington, D.C., the alma mater of Kamala Harris, the vice president, who's expected here in the next few hours for her either victory or concession speech, depending on which way the night goes.
Oh, absolutely, Zaka. We'll keep coming back to you. Let me go straight across now to my colleague Akanksha Swaroop. In fact, Akanksha getting us all those reactions from New York. She's joining us from where all the buzz is usually. Times Square, Akanksha, the action never stops there. It's been a knife's edge race in most of the states in United States of America. What a historic presidential campaign it has been. It's been full of twists and turns. So what is the sense that you're getting from the ground? New York historically has been always leaning towards the Democrats, except perhaps for one borough. But it's been a nail-biting election, and you've been in the midst of all of it.
Absolutely, Avantika. And you know, as you rightly pointed out, this is a city that never sleeps. And I am here at Times Square to just give you a quick glimpse of where I am. I'm going to request my VJ Arpit. It is a very colorful lot over here. New Yorkers, what you find over here in Times Square are quite a loud, crazy bunch. But at the same time, they're very fiercely protective and private about their political beliefs. So one has to really, ease them into sharing what is it that is on their minds. And that is something that I had to do. But to tell you, as you rightly highlighted, that New York has been a Democratic stronghold, and it continues to be so. There are 5 boroughs over here, including Manhattan, Queens. The only borough that happens to be Republican is Staten Island. But As far as New York is concerned, last time they opted for a Republican president. That was in the year 1984, and that was Ronald Reagan. Ever since, there's only been a spate of Democratic presidential candidates. So that's the scene in New York City. But the issues that are governing this election, basically to put it in black and white, it's a battle between economy versus freedom. Versus, that is what Kamala Harris stands for, and economy is what Donald Trump's trying to spin this election around. He's been attacking the Democrats that they've ruined the American economy, and in fact, if he were to come to power, he will be resurrecting it.
In Mississippi, and its 6 electoral votes go to the Republican. Let's bring in the electoral map right now. Donald Trump in the lead, 178 electoral votes. Kamala Harris has 91 electoral votes, 270 electoral votes. As always, needed to win. Let's take a look at the outstanding races right now. Arizona joins the map of key race alerts. Kamala Harris has 50% of the vote. Donald Trump has 49.2% of the vote. That is a 15,478 vote lead for Kamala Harris, with 49% of the estimated vote counted. Kamala Harris in Wisconsin, 49.9% of the vote. Donald Trump bringing up the rear, 48.5% of the vote. Kamala Harris with a 19,910 vote lead. That's with 43% of the estimated vote counted in Wisconsin. Pennsylvania, Donald Trump in the lead there now, 50.3% of the vote in Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris has 48.7% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 58,648 lead right now, with an estimated 51% of the vote in Pennsylvania. In Georgia, Donald Trump in the lead there, 51.8% of the vote. Kamala Harris, 47.2% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 204,640 vote lead. That's with 81% of the estimated vote in Georgia. In battleground Michigan, Kamala Harris in the lead, 51.1% of the vote. Donald Trump with 47% of the vote. Kamala Harris with a 43,307 vote lead. That's with an estimated 19% of the vote in battleground Michigan. In battleground North Carolina, Donald Trump in the lead, 52.4% of the vote. Kamala Harris with 46.4% of the vote. Donald Trump with 253,752 more votes as of right now than Kamala Harris. That's with 72% of the estimated vote in. In New Mexico, Kamala Harris in the lead, 50.7% of the vote. Donald Trump with 47.6% of the vote. That means Harris has an 8,592 vote lead over Trump. That's with less than a third, 31% of the estimated vote in from New Mexico, still early in New Mexico. Kamala Harris takes the lead again in Virginia with 49.1% of the vote. Donald Trump with 49% of the vote. Kamala Harris with a 1,118 vote lead. That's with 68% of the estimated votes in from Virginia. John, what do you want to talk about?
We have a changing map. We can talk about it all. We'll walk through it. Let's just take
Harris at 30. That's because a large proportion of, the blue states, New York, New Jersey, many of the East Coast states have not been declared yet. California, which is the biggest state, which has reliably been Democratic, has not been declared. So when those numbers come in, it'll be much more even. It won't be this 154-30. But I think the critical thing to watch out for is the battleground states. From what I have seen right now, in Georgia and in North Carolina, Trump is leading, so that's a positive sign for him. That shows that if he holds on to Georgia, he lost Georgia by a very narrow margin last time, he has multiple paths to 270. North Carolina was a big sort of, people were speculating about it because of the hurricane. Large parts of the state were devastated by the hurricane. And of course, today what they saw, a large number of African Americans turning out. So far, those two states have counted much more votes than the blue wall states because they closed earlier.
In fact, we're hearing that the former President Donald Trump has won Wyoming. In fact, this is a state that he had won in 2016 and 2020 as well. So a big news coming in. In fact, he surged past 100 electoral votes with projections showing him ahead in very important key states. But former President Trump winning Wyoming in the 2024 presidential race, a state that he had won in 2016, 2020, beating his Democratic opponent by about 45% points in both the cycles. So Wyoming, that's the big one. In fact, CNN projections is also saying that Trump is winning in South Dakota. Not just that, he is taking a lead in North Carolina and Georgia as well. So two big important states, swing states, Georgia and North Carolina, Trump taking a lead. In fact, he's already won Florida, Alabama, Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and West Virginia. So this is the information that we're getting in right now about the early leads and the information coming in from an important state like Wyoming, which the former President Donald Trump has already won earlier before in 2016 and 2020. And importantly, he's taking a lead in North Carolina and Georgia as well. North Carolina was a state that he had won in 2016 and in 2020 as well, wherein Trump had beaten Clinton and in Biden as well. Zaka Jacob joins us now for the very latest. Zaka, this is some news coming in. The former President Donald Trump winning Wyoming, and not just that, he has surged past 100 electoral votes with projections showing him ahead in some important key states. He's also taking a lead in North Carolina and in Georgia as well. What's the latest at your end, and what exactly are you hearing?
Yeah, so I just want to qualify for our viewers the numbers that are running up. I think Donald Trump at 154 and Kamala Harris at 30. That's because a large proportion of, the blue states, New York, New Jersey, many of the East Coast states have not been declared yet. California, which is the biggest state, which has reliably been Democratic, has not been declared. So when those numbers come in, it'll be much more even. It won't be this 154-30. But I think the critical thing to watch out for is the battleground states. From what I have seen right now in Georgia and in North Carolina, Trump is leading, so that's a positive sign for him. That shows that if he holds on to Georgia, he lost Georgia by a very narrow margin last time, he has multiple paths to 270. North Carolina was a big sort of, people were speculating about it because of the hurricane. Large parts of the state were devastated by the hurricane. And of course, today what they saw, a large number of African Americans turning out. So far, those two states have counted much more votes than
win the 2024 presidential bid. And right now, Donald Trump has the lead. CNN's Paula is with us on the broadcast. Paula, we were talking about these swing states, and now we're learning about Ohio, which is completely going the Republican way. What are things looking like for Kamala Harris at the moment? If Trump wins this one, the rest of the three states that are left as far as the swing states are concerned, it's an absolute must-win for Kamala. Otherwise, she's out of the race.
The must-win remains the same for Kamala Harris. It is Wisconsin, it is Michigan, it is Pennsylvania. And there can be absolutely no upsets. Why? Because while they're still too close to call, North Carolina and Georgia are beginning to look good for Donald Trump. The issue here, though, and you bring up an important one, while the fact that Ohio was always supposed to go to Donald Trump, when you look at the margin in Ohio, it is quite high for Donald Trump. And when you consider it looks like he is going to carry a state like that quite strongly, then you're starting to look at how that might extrapolate to a state like Wisconsin. And perhaps even a place like Michigan. Right now, though, I caution that so many of these races are still too close to call, especially when you see how divided the states themselves are between rural counts or counts in cities or counts in the suburbs around those cities.
Right, Paula, but so far, from whatever we are learning of the US polls and the results of the early trends that are trickling in, it has been pretty much evident. And these are the places that were going to go the Republican way. If we take a look at what has gone to the Democrats' favor, it has been places like New York or New Jersey for that matter. So it has been pretty much in line with the trend.
Well, what has has been true throughout this was that the polls indicated this would be close and that it has been quite close. And that even comes down to the popular vote. I mean, think about it. Donald Trump did not win the popular vote. That just did not happen even in 2016 when he actually won the presidency. Right now, there is a chance he will win the popular vote in this country. Not just win the election, but win the popular vote, which will mean that a majority of voters voted for him. It's not just the Electoral College.
Absolutely.
This is not definitive yet. I do want to stress that it is very early, and there are a lot of votes still to come in. This is what the Trump campaign, though, is counting on right now. You can hear the enthusiasm behind me. As far as this crowd is concerned, they are incredibly confident right now and do believe that Donald Trump will be back in the White House as president.
Absolutely,
What is
Paula.
going to be crucial now is to look at
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
to
I
look
just
at a
wanted
state
to
like
understand
Michigan.
about that entire mood because you are there at the Trump headquarters in Florida and we can see the kind of cheer that he is receiving because the early trends clearly are going in his favor. So that's an absolute must do when it is, voting as far as in favor of the Republicans is concerned. So first of all, about the mood around you, and then we'll go further and talk about how this red mirage really is progressing from here on.
I mean, look, it is incredibly optimistic here. This is not 2020 as they continue to see the votes come in. But they also are looking at the margins. They are looking at the margins in a place like Ohio. They are looking at margins in places like North Carolina where they expect it to be closer. And that's why they do not believe in the mirage, so to speak. They believe that the results for 2024 will chart their own course for the Trump campaign. And I go back to what I said about the popular vote. For Donald Trump to win a majority of Americans right across the country would be significant for his campaign, and his campaign will see it as true legitimacy in governing. I do want to stress as well, though, just as important, right? Congress.
Right.
Do the Republicans hold on to the House? Do the Democrats hold on to the Senate? They could switch, or it could go either way. That is truly significant as well in terms of whoever gets into the White House and how they'll be able to govern.
Right, Paula, thank you so much for all of those updates there. We'll continue to come back to you. But right now, we are, in fact, going to our guests who are joining us early this morning. Harshvi Shringla, who is a former Indian ambassador to the United States of America, is with us. Also with us is Raymond Vickery, author and advisor on U.S.-India relations and a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce, Trade Development. He's live with us from Washington, D.C. So I begin with you. All right, I'm told Vickery is yet to join us. In fact, we will go to Ambassador Shringla at the moment. Ambassador Shringla, I was just wanting to understand from you, since we are learning of these early trends that are coming in, it is pretty much swinging in favor of Donald Trump as far as Ohio and the other key Republican states who have voted in favor of Republicans are concerned. But we have to go back to what happened back then in 2020. I was talking to my colleague from CNN as far as the red mirage is concerned. How do you think the Republicans and in turn Donald Trump is looking at keenly watching whether or not this red mirage really goes ahead and goes and swings in favor of the Republicans, or is it going to be a rerun of 2020 because Biden clearly swayed it away from the Republicans? The votes completely turned in the favor of the Democrats back then. How nervous or how confident do you think Donald Trump is at the moment?
Well, I think you're right in saying that it's very early to really come to any conclusions about the way the race is going. I imagine both candidates will be watching, the numbers coming in very carefully. The point I want to make is that, voting is going as predicted.
Yes.
States are voting on predictable lines. The red states are going red, the blue states are going blue. My own prognosis is that everything depends on Pennsylvania. That one state will determine who will win the presidency, who will win the electoral college vote. And I think we will have to come down to exactly what happens there. Because there is a trend that, Donald Trump is winning some of the Sun Belt states, whereas, Kamala Harris may win some of the Rust Belt states, which is basically Wisconsin, perhaps even Michigan. But Pennsylvania, I think, is going to be the key to this entire race. And we will have to watch that part very carefully. It's a very close contest. with Donald Trump leading with a very, very small margin. He was trailing earlier. But it's early days. I think 50% of the vote is yet to be counted.
Yes.
And I would focus on that one state, Pennsylvania, that would be very critical to the way this election is decided.
Right, Ambassador Shringla, thank you so much. In fact, hold your thought there. We also have Stephen Golub, who's an international affairs expert, who's also live with us from California. Stephen, about these early trends, and since Ambassador Shringla was also mentioning about Pennsylvania, a key swing state, so far more than 35 or 40% of the votes have been counted, and they are sort of neck and neck and yet in favor of Kamala Harris. If she loses this one, along with Michigan and Wisconsin, she loses the race to the US presidential polls. How do you see this working, either in favor of Kamala Harris or probably swinging a completely different way?
Well, yes, certainly if she loses those three states, she loses the presidency. I think it's fair to point out that the unique system the U.S. has means that Kamala Harris could win the popular vote, as Hillary Clinton did in 2016, yet still lose the presidency by virtue of our rather odd electoral college system. I agree with the ambassador in that I would not place too much credence on these early returns in the swing states, because so much depends on which votes are being counted, which counties, whether the mail-in votes are being counted, and all of that could really affect the outcome in ways we may not know until late tonight, tomorrow, or in Pennsylvania, given the way their system works, it could take even longer. The one thing I'd flag for you is that was a promising development for Harris in terms of the tracking the early voting, the mail-in voting, is that an inordinate number of women were voting more than usual as a percentage. That could well weigh in her favor in terms of the fact that she is drawing, there's a real gender gap. She's drawing much more support from women. Trump is drawing much more support for men. But even those early indicators fall into the same kind of trap that I mentioned of let's not jump to conclusions.
Absolutely. Mr. Stephen and Ambassador Shringla, thank you so much. I'd request you to stay on with us. But right now, what we're doing is cutting across to our sister channel, CNN, to take a look at these early trends, cutting across live to CNN now.
Yeah, we wanted to look across all three blue wall states that John was just walking us through, looking at this slice of the vote, the Latino vote in the blue wall states. Now, they only make up 6% of the electorate in each of these states, but look at the difference in the margin. So Harris is getting in Pennsylvania 58% of the Latino vote, again, 6% of the electorate, to Donald Trump's 41%. That's a 17-point advantage. But 4 years ago, Biden beat Trump with Latinos in Pennsylvania by 42 points. So that is a huge movement for Trump in narrowing that gap. Similar story in Michigan. You see the Latino vote makes up a 6% of the share. Sorry, not a similar story, a reverse. Donald Trump is winning the Latino vote in Michigan with 60% of the vote. Harris, 35% of the vote. That's a 25% advantage for Trump among Latinos. That is a big change when Biden won Latinos in Michigan by 11 points 4 years ago. That's a 36-point swing in the margin. And if you look at Wisconsin, Harris is at 61% among Latinos, Trump at 38%. Again, 6% of the electorate. These margins matter. That is about where Biden and Trump were 4 years ago. So not a lot of change in the Latino vote in Wisconsin, but a lot of change in Michigan and Pennsylvania towards Trump, Jane.
Fascinating stuff, David Chalian. Thanks so much. And let's talk about this with my panel here. Dana Bash, your thoughts?
I mean, Pennsylvania and Michigan, in particular Pennsylvania, because there has been so much focus on the Latino vote in Pennsylvania, especially the Puerto Rican population there since the Madison Square Garden.
91 electoral votes. There are 270 electoral votes needed to win. Donald Trump holding a sizable lead in the electoral vote as of now, but we are expecting more votes to drop in Democratic strongholds in key battleground states. We're also counting down to the next round of poll closings at 11 p.m. Eastern, when Democrats are expecting to claim a gold mine of electoral votes out west in California. That's all ahead.
Let me also now welcome Mr. Raymond Vickery, who is joining us. He's the author and advisor on U.S.-India relations and a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce Trade Development. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Vickery, let me take this very point that we were seeing on CNN, talking about the Latino votes, especially in the swing states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and how much of that is keenly being watched. When it is about that, do you think things will look different for Donald Trump, whether or not the Democrats, the people who usually used to vote in favor of the Democrats among the Latino population, are swinging towards Trump, you feel?
Well, that certainly was what we just heard from the CNN analyst. That's really quite amazing to me when it is Latino immigrants that the former president has characterized as being people who were criminals, came from insane asylums and so forth. So it's a very, very puzzling development. But it is a development that if that is holding and if that is true, which is very bad news for the Democrats. I would say I think that there is a real question here in regard to what happens after the polls are completely closed and all the votes are counted. We've had a great day, it seems to me, in terms of democracy holding. Been very little instances of things not working. But the question is, what will happen with democracy going forward? And it's really very puzzling if, in fact, people are believing the kinds of lies which have been told by Donald Trump over the past 4 years and disregarding them and saying, well, we're going to go with them anyhow. So American democracy is more than just an election. It's the rule of law, it's the rights of the minority, it's human rights, it's freedom. And what we have to see is what will happen if Trump is wins. But there's still a lot to go, and we'll see what happens.
Ambassador Shringla, taking on from that very point that Mr. Vickery was making, I really want to understand, does any of that you see, is mattering here as far as the elections are concerned here in the United States? Because we do know how Trump is a convicted felon. We do know about the lies that he has told in public, but none of that really seems to be impacted so far. We also do understand how many of the Democrat-leaning votes are yet to be counted. But we see the numbers on the screen: 207 in the red. How do you see this swing really impacting the voters in America? Because clearly, right now, the early trends are showing what is favoring Trump.
So, first and foremost, I would not call it a swing, because I think what you're seeing in terms of the, results coming in as far as the states are concerned is on expected lines. The red states are going to the Republicans, and the blue states traditionally are going to the Democrats. The only point I want to make is that Iowa has just gone to Trump.
Yes.
Yesterday's New York Times Siena polls had predicted that Iowa was showing a 3-point lead for Harris, mainly because of women voters. But that has not turned out to be correct. Iowa has been declared for Trump. So it is on expected lines. Iowa is the red state. It's gone to the Republicans. So everything is going on expected lines, except the popular vote. And it's very early to say what the popular vote is going to be like. But in terms of electoral colleges, I think you will find that with California and a number of West Coast states being declared, the tally for Harris will go up, and it will become, again, neck to neck. And so we will have to come down to the battleground states. And again, I come down to Pennsylvania and possibly Michigan being absolutely key to determining who would be the next president of the United States. I mean, these two states, especially Pennsylvania with 19 electoral college votes, is going to be very, very important in that regard. And I think this is where we have to watch very carefully to see the final outcome of this particular contest.
Right. Stephen, I'll come back to you in just a bit, but we have to cut across to CNN and see what are the further projections looking like. Like Ambassador Shringla just mentioned, Ohio has gone to Trump, and that's a Republican traditional vote bank, although we had seen how there were projections that were indeed talking about a Harris victory from there, but that unfortunately has not happened. Let's see what further are we learning from CNN.
Take a look at the fight for electoral votes right now. As of right now, Donald Trump has 207 electoral votes. Kamala Harris has 91 electoral votes. There are 270 needed to win. The results, of course, are still coming in, and we have a key race alert right now. In Arizona, Donald Trump is in the lead with 49.6% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 49.5% of the vote. Donald Trump with a narrow 1,046 vote lead with 51% of the estimated vote in from battleground Arizona. In battleground Wisconsin, Donald Trump is in the lead there with 49.3% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 49.1% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 4,004 up. That just increased. So to a 6,556 lead ahead of Kamala Harris with an estimated 55% of the vote in from Wisconsin. In Pennsylvania, Donald Trump maintaining his lead, 50.9% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 48.1% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 121,000 plus vote lead. That's with 61% of the estimated vote in from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. In Georgia, Donald Trump maintaining his lead with 51.2% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 48% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 153,980 vote lead with an estimated 86% of the vote in. In battleground Michigan, Kamala Harris in the lead. She has 52.5% of the vote. Donald Trump with 45.7% of the vote. Kamala Harris with a more than 102,000 vote lead. That's with 27% of the estimated vote in from battleground Michigan. In North Carolina, Donald Trump maintaining his lead. He has 50.7% of the vote. Kamala Harris with 47.9% of the vote. Donald Trump is 134,000 plus votes ahead with 84% of the estimated vote in the Tar Heel state. In Virginia, Kamala Harris still in the lead, 49.9% of the vote. Donald Trump has 48.3% of the vote. Kamala Harris is maintaining a 55,000 plus vote lead with 3/4 of the vote in there. In Virginia, 75% of the estimated vote. And then in New Mexico, Kamala Harris with 53.2% of the vote in the lead there. Donald Trump has 44.9% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 48,589 more votes than Donald Trump right now with an estimated 65% of the vote. Still about a third of the vote left to count in New Mexico. And Boris Sanchez has a new projection for us in the fight for control of the U.S. Senate. Boris?
Yeah, Jake, a handful of important projections to bring you, beginning with history being made in the state of Maryland. There, the executive of Prince George's County, Democrat Angela Alsobrooks, will defeat former two-term Republican Governor Larry Hogan. She becomes the first African-American person ever elected to the Senate from the state of Maryland. Another projection to bring you, this one from the state of Delaware. Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester defeats Eric Hansen, a former Walmart executive, the Democrat here becoming the first woman and the first African-American person ever elected to the Senate from Delaware. A projection to bring you in the Northeast, this time in New York. There, incumbent Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, a former presidential candidate, she will win her third full term in office as she defeats former NYPD detective Mike Sapercone. Let's get you some updates on the Republican side, beginning with the Lone Star State of Texas. Going into the night, Democrats had optimism about potentially flipping this seat from red to blue instead. Republican incumbent Ted Cruz wins re-election, cruising to his third term against Democrat Colin Allred, a congressman from the Dallas area, a former Tennessee Titans middle linebacker. Cruz here winning by a substantial margin in the Lone Star State. An update now from Mississippi. There, incumbent Republican Roger Wicker wins his third full term, defeating civil rights attorney Ty Pickens. Re-election for Wicker in Mississippi. An update now from one of the reddest states in the country, Wyoming. There, incumbent Republican Senator John Barrasso wins his fourth term as he defeats Scott Morrow, a union official who touts his black belt in Taekwondo on his campaign website. Barrasso reelected in Wyoming. Some more projections to bring you, beginning in Missouri. There, incumbent Republican Senator Josh Hawley, perhaps best known for being the first senator to object to certifying the 2020 election results in favor of Joe Biden. He defeats Democrat Lucas Kunz to win re-election in Missouri. Meantime, in Nebraska, this special election, Pete Ricketts, a former governor there, he defeats Preston Love Jr., a former campaign manager for Jesse Jackson's presidential campaign in 1984. This is to serve out the term left by retired Republican Senator Ben Sasse. An update from North Dakota now. There, incumbent Republican Senator Kevin Cramer wins his second term, defeating engineering professor Katrina Christensen. Cramer reelected in North Dakota. So what do all these results mean for the magic number that Republicans need to take control of the U.S. Senate? Remember, they started out the night needing 2 Democratic seats to flip the chamber. Right now, that number with a pickup in West Virginia is 1. And currently, as of this moment, Republicans are leading in 4 races where Democrats hold seats. But hold on, because that needs some context. 2 of these states are fairly early. One of them is Montana, and that race is expected to be competitive. But the other one is Minnesota, in which we're not really expecting that close of a race tonight. And there's also potentially a twist. I'll explain that in just a moment.
Going back to my guests, Mr. Raymond Vickery and Mr. Stephen Golub, who continue to be with us on the broadcast. Stephen, I wanted to understand from you, we will talk about the Senate numbers so far that are going in the Republicans' favor. So how much more do they need to take control of the Senate becomes an important question. But, talking about Donald Trump and talking about his home state, even as we speak about how he has won, Kansas and Iowa, the fact that something was being projected could be swinging in favor of Kamala Harris. We also were talking about the Latino votes, and that really is possibly not working in favor of Kamala Harris. How do you see the entire policy of the Republicans, in turn Donald Trump, really working, where he has been very, very vocal in talking about the immigrant population in United States of America, and how, we've had the guests in the past talking about how he has badmouthed the Latino population, and yet the votes do seem to be in favor of the Republicans at the moment out of the ones that are being counted. Which way do you see this really going, when it is especially from the key 7 swing states?
Well, the thing you said that I would pay most attention to or most emphasize is at the moment. As I said earlier, and as I think we agreed, it may be too early to tell. Could be that mail-in ballots will favor Harris more. Could be that certain counties will come in that favor Harris more. So this thing is by no means not over. And ironically, the key state that a lot of this could hinge on, Pennsylvania, might be the state, by virtue of the way elections work there, that delivers results latest. Certainly not tonight, I believe, maybe not tomorrow or until the day after. So let's keep that in mind. In terms of your very good question about immigration, I guess I'll start by, actually, since I spent some time in India and have a real affection and respect for the Indian people, what this could mean for Indian Americans and for Indian immigrants and the like. Because Donald Trump's lead immigration advisor has said America is for Americans and Americans only. And you don't have to read too carefully between the lines there, given the background of this fellow, Stephen Miller, to know that he's talking about white Americans. And really that could mean in terms of restricting immigration from India, be it for tech people or for other people, and other types of restrictions that could affect Indians trying to come to the U.S. and affecting Indian Americans, because what Trump did in his first term that could even be strengthened in a second term would be to bolster the bigotry, so that even in an informal way, he could really hurt Indian Americans and other minority groups. In terms of Latinos, that may be an appeal to men. I think what it breaks down to, again, is more women are supporting Kamala Harris, more men are supporting Trump, maybe among Latino men and black men. But this, I don't mean to single them out. This extends beyond to all men, including whites. There may be a certain amount of appeal based on macho, based on machismo, based on the notion that a woman can't lead the country, based on all sorts of biases. And let's face it, if Kamala Harris were a white man with the same credentials, the same background, the same skills, there's a good chance that because sexism wouldn't be operating, she'd already be further up in certain states than, and in terms of the popular vote, than we're seeing now. That's a reality of American society. On the other hand, in a more positive vein, women are highly motivated. We don't know whether all of their votes have been counted proportionately yet. They've got motivation based on abortion and also based on the general sense, based on what Trump himself and his surrogates have said, as his allies have said, which have been some very vulgar comments about women and other things that have emanated from that campaign. Let's not discount the possibility that there could yet be a surge of female votes pro-Harris that haven't yet been counted.
Absolutely. And yet we are seeing what we are seeing at the moment, and especially we're talking about how certain Latino votes, and even if we talk about these young educated women from America not really voting in favor of Harris, and that becomes a concerning point, case in point for the Democrats. We will continue to keep our eyes on this exact very point, on how much of that women voting is going in favor of the Democrats and in turn Kamala Harris. But right now we are going into a very, very short break, coming right back.
The map of key race alerts. Kamala Harris has 50% of the vote. Donald Trump has 49.2% of the vote. That is a 15,478 vote lead for Kamala Harris, with 49% of the estimated vote counted. Kamala Harris in Wisconsin, 49.9% of the vote. Donald Trump bringing up the rear, 48.5% of the vote. Kamala Harris with a 19,910 vote lead. That's with 43% of the estimated vote counted.
In fact, we're hearing that the former President Donald Trump has won Wyoming. In fact, this is a state that he had won in 2016 and 2020 as well. So a big news coming in. In fact, he surged past 100 electoral votes, with projections showing him ahead in very important key states. But former President Trump winning Wyoming in the 2024 presidential race, a state that he had won in 2016, 2020, beating his Democratic opponent by about 45% points in both the cycles. So Wyoming, that's the big one. In fact, CNN projections is also saying that Trump is winning in South Dakota. Not just that, he is taking a lead in North Carolina and Georgia as well. So two big important states, swing states, Georgia and North Carolina, Trump taking a lead. In fact, he's already won Florida, Alabama, Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and West Virginia. So this is the information that we're getting in right now about the early leads and the information coming in from an important state like Wyoming, which the former President Donald Trump has already won earlier before in 2016 and 2020. And importantly, he's taking a lead in North Carolina and Georgia as well. North Carolina was a state that he had won in 2016 and in 2020 as well, wherein Trump had beaten Clinton and in Biden as well. Zaka Jacob joins us now for the very latest. Zaka, this is some news coming in. The former President Donald Trump winning Wyoming, and not just that, he has surged past 100 electoral votes, with projections showing him ahead in some important key states. He's also taking a lead in North Carolina and in Georgia as well. What's the latest at your end, and what exactly are you hearing?
Yeah, so I just want to qualify for our viewers the numbers that are running up. I think Donald Trump at 154 and Kamala Harris at 30. That's because a large proportion of, the blue states, New York, New Jersey, many of the East Coast states have not been declared yet. California, which is the biggest state, which has reliably been Democratic, has not been declared. So when those numbers come in, it'll be much more even. It won't be this 154-30. But I think the critical thing to watch out for is the battleground states. From what I have seen right now in Georgia and in North Carolina, Trump is leading, so that's a positive sign for him. That shows that if he holds on to Georgia, he lost Georgia by a very narrow margin last time, he has multiple paths to 270. North Carolina was a big sort of, people were speculating about it because of the hurricane. Large parts of the state were devastated by the hurricane. And of course, today what they saw, a large number of African Americans turning out. So far, those two states have counted much more votes than the blue wall states because they closed earlier. And I believe in Georgia, for example, 70% of the vote has been counted, and Trump has a decent lead of 200,000 plus. Whether or not, when the Atlanta suburban areas and Metro Atlanta start sort of coming in. The votes start.
Now has 145 electoral votes. 270 electoral votes are needed to win. Donald Trump is 59 electoral votes away from that. Let's look at these battleground states now. Arizona, Donald Trump in the lead there, 49.6%. Kamala Harris right behind him with 49.5%. Donald Trump has a 2,356 vote lead with 51% of the estimated vote in from Arizona. Wisconsin, Donald Trump in the lead there too, 49.9% of the vote. Kamala Harris is 48.4%. Donald Trump has a 28,576 vote lead with an estimated 59% of the estimated vote in from the Badger State. In the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Donald Trump maintaining his lead. He's at 50.7% of the vote. Kamala Harris with 48.2% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 119,411 vote lead with 68% of the estimated vote in from Pennsylvania. In Georgia, Donald Trump still in the lead there, 51% of the vote. Kamala Harris with 48.2% of the vote. Donald Trump with a 136,328 vote lead. That is with 88% of the estimated vote in from the state of Georgia. In North Carolina, another battleground where Donald Trump leads, 50.8% of the vote. Kamala Harris has 47.8% of the vote. Donald Trump has a 145,388 vote lead over Kamala Harris right now with an estimated 85% of the vote in from the Tar Heel state. In battleground Michigan, Kamala Harris in the lead. She has 51.3% of the vote. Donald Trump has 46.9%. Kamala Harris is 74,838 votes ahead of Donald Trump, but that's less than a third of the vote counted there. 30% of the estimated vote in from the state of Michigan. In the Commonwealth of Virginia, Kamala Harris in the lead there still, but narrowly so. 50.1% of the vote. Donald Trump has 48% of the vote. Kamala Harris with a 73,375 vote lead. That is with 78% of the estimated vote in from the Commonwealth of Virginia. In New Mexico, Harris leads there too, 52.6% of the vote. Donald Trump with 45.5% of the vote. That is with an estimated 69% of the vote in. Harris with a roughly 43,000 vote lead. Let's go now to Abby Phillip, who is at Harris campaign headquarters in Washington, D.C., at the campus of Howard University. Abby, what are you hearing from the Harris campaign, if anything?
Yeah, Jake, we actually just got a pretty significant update from the Harris campaign campaign manager, Jen O'Malley Dillon, who sent out a memo to her staff tonight laying out what they see ahead in the coming days and hours, and my colleague Jeff Zeleny is here with me. The memo essentially says, Jake, that the returns are coming in slowly. They still see their path, but that path is largely going to be through the blue wall, as Jeff and I were just discussing. The key point that Jen O'Malley Dillon is making is that this is a close race. This is the close race that they have been expecting. She says to her staff, we are built for this. Let's finish the night out. We will see you tomorrow. They are not expecting this to be wrapped up tonight.
They are not, because the margins are so small. And just reading from that memo, should we have known all along our clearest path to 270 was through the blue wall states. And again, they point out the cities we were talking about, Milwaukee, Detroit, and of course Philadelphia. Abby, a central question hanging over all of this, and indeed the crowd here waiting behind us, is Vice President Harris going to address the crowd? That is a possibility. We will see in the coming days as we hear some helicopters overhead here. We will see. But the bottom line is they know this is a close race. This is going to be not resolved tonight in their eyes.
Yeah, Jeff, this is a critical moment, I think, for the Harris campaign to show where they get to 270. And Jake, it looks like they are not foreclosing really on anything in the map right now that is not called. They're still waiting for the polls to close in parts of the Sun Belt, for those results to come trickling in. But again, it's the blue wall again. It is it's Pennsylvania, it is Wisconsin, and it is Michigan, where the best chances are for Harris to get to that 270 that she needs to become president of the United States.
All right, Abby Phillip and Jeff Zeleny, thanks so much. Let's go to John King at the Magic Wall. John, explain the theory of the case for the Harris campaign right now, if you would.
Right, and you heard Jeff and Abby emphasizing even the campaign saying essentially they don't rule out any other possibilities, but we're really banking on the blue wall. Well, at the moment as we speak, 2 of the 3 blue wall states, that's Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, 2 of the 3 are red. We're not done. We're not done, but 2 of the 3 are red. Why is that significant? Well, let's look at the Sun Belt states. And again, the Harris campaign is not ruling this out, but you show this here. Donald Trump, 142,000 votes ahead in North Carolina. I can show you the live outstanding votes. And when I show you the live outstanding votes, you will see some pretty big circles in the blue areas, large metropolitan areas and suburban areas where the Democrats do quite well. I just want to say, at 85% reporting statewide and 142,000 vote lead, is it mathematically possible? Are enough votes out there? Yes. When you get to this point in an election in a state Donald Trump won twice, you start to think, okay, this looks like it did in 2016 and in 2020. It looks more like 2016 than it did in 2020, to be honest with you. But you look at it, and if you're in the Harris campaign, you're calling all these counties, and you're trying to figure out, how many votes are out, what percentage are we getting. But if you're looking at the North Carolina map, I'd rather be Donald Trump than the Vice President of the United States right now. So then you bring up the Georgia map, and again, this one, I'll say this again, I'm a broken record. 2024 is not 2020. There's not as many mail-in ballots. We won't have as many large percentages of Democratic votes coming in the days after. But Donald Trump was ahead by more than 200,000 votes at this point 4 years ago. So let's just be cautious for the sake of being cautious. And yet, at the same time, I just said that, I want to tell you he's 136,000 votes ahead in a state that was decided by 11,000 votes last cycle. 88% of the vote is in. So where is the live outstanding vote? Live outstanding vote. This is where in the Harris campaign, you're just hoping that overnight these Democratic areas report not just their votes, but a lot of votes. You're hoping turnout exceeds your expectations. So you see down here in the Savannah area, this is where the races are won or lost for Democrats, Atlanta and the suburbs around it. So let's come out of that map. And again, here's the key point. Fulton County, 90% of the vote is in. Yes, she's getting 72% of the vote. Just want to check, compare that. It's a little below where President Biden was, but it's close. But remember, he won the state by 11,000 votes, so she can't really afford to be below him anywhere, or not by much anyway. You move over to Cobb County, 91% in. This is a big suburban county, right? So 91%, you have some change to make up there. She's at 57% if you round that up. The President of the United States was at 56, so she's running equal, maybe a little bit ahead there. So let's come over to DeKalb County here. Let's come up to 2024 and see what's left.